Welcome to This Week in Rauchbier, the world's most important, long-running, and awarded show dedicated to smoked beer. I'm your host, John Hall, and we're brought to you by Beer Edge. Check out beeredge.com, follow us on social media, listen to the Beer Edge podcast, as well as the Drink Beer, Think Beer podcast, and please support independent journalism. And don't forget to keep up with This Week in Rauchbier on Twitter, Instagram, and on Facebook. Bill and Hagen are on assignment this week, but I'm so glad to be joined in the Rauchbier broadcast booth by Eric Leto. He's here not only because of his love of Rauchbier, but also for helping out the International Red Cross and its efforts in Ukraine. The Drinkers for Ukraine initiative is still going on, and you can learn more about how you can help by visiting drinkersforukraine.com, where you can have the chance to bid on cool beer experiences or to brew a solidarity beer. And now for a proper introduction. Eric is a beer drinker. He's a home brewer who lives in Stockholm, Sweden. He's been a passionate smoked beer fan for the past 15 years with a particular fondness for traditional German smoked lagers and has brewed several variations of the style. Eric, welcome to the program. Thank you for the support. And let me start off by asking you about your first Rauchbier and your overall fondness for the style.
Thank you, John. My first favorite, or I first fell in love with the style when I had my first Schlenkerla Märzen. So this was back in the mid-aughts, and I discovered it at the local Systembolaget, which is the state-run monopoly here in Sweden. And I would still say that it's my go-to choice in Rauchbier.
It can be such a polarizing style for people. Was it an immediate fondness for you, or did it grow over time?
I mean, to me, I think what makes these beers so special is that you start out with a simple yet elegant and quaffable beer, like a Märzen or a Bock beer, and then you add this new dimension to the flavor, almost like an orthogonal component that adds complexity and intrigue, and while you're still keeping this beer highly drinkable. And I think it was almost immediate that I realized that, wow, this is something special.
What's the Rauchbier industry like? What's the local scene like in Stockholm or even throughout Sweden right now?
I think it's actually on the rise. So this is, of course, a lot of anecdotal evidence. I haven't crunched the numbers, but if I look at what's being released at Systembolaget, which is the state-run liquor monopoly, it used to be hard to find even a single smoked beer, and let alone one that's brewed by a craft brewery. But this has changed in the recent past, and I think a lot of Swedish craft brewers are daring to foray into the Rauch space, as I call it.
Yeah.
So I think right now there are 10 different Rauch beers that you can order online, and in addition to a couple of Schlenkerlas. So I think it's definitely on the rise.
Are you finding that the Swedish breweries are largely staying in the traditional recipe space, or have you seen some innovation that not only uses Rauch malt, but also specialty ingredients?
I think there's a place for both here in Sweden. Traditionally, we've had a lot of smoked porters in the past. I think Nils Oskar was one of the breweries that's started in that. Yeah. And but now the most recent ones have been sort of in the traditional vein, most of them, I think. Some are using local ingredients as well. You have traditional smoked malts from Gotland, which is an island outside of the coast of Sweden.
Yep.
Where they make their own traditional smoked beverages, and they have a special type of malt that you can use. And some of the Swedish brewers are bringing that into their smoked beers.
Rauchbier and food, I think, compare really well together. And we've obviously talked about the Bamberg onion in the past. Um, is there a traditional or staple Swedish dish that you think pairs particularly well with a smoked beer?
I think in general, I mean, Swedish, what we call husmanskost, the sort of everyday food, pairs pretty well with the smokiness. For instance, we have things like dishes made of fried potatoes and where you add some lingonberries to get a bit of sourness or tartness and adding a bit of smoke to that. I mean, usually you serve it with bacon or something like that, and then I definitely see a place with smoked beers in that combination.
I love it. Do you have a Rauchbier in your glass right now?
I do, actually. This is the Ringebrau Rauchbier from Stigbergets. And Stigbergets is one of these Swedish craft breweries that have recently released their traditional German smoked lager. And it's very lovely. It's a little bit darker than what you would see from Schlenkerla, for instance, but it's very drinkable.
I love it. On average, how many Rauchbiers a month are you enjoying?
Ooh, that's a hard question. If I brewed one myself, then it's a lot. And if not, then it's what I can find on the shelf at Systembolaget. So that it depends on when they are released to the public. But on a lucky month, a few at least.
Excellent. We're going to be talking about home brewing Rauchbiers in a later on segment. But for now, I want to turn our attention to This Week in Rauchbier's Brewer Spotlight. And with that, I'm excited to welcome Bill Cherry. He's the founder and brewmaster at Switchback Brewery in Vermont. He's also had a distinguished brewing career, but it really hit its stride after he created the Flynn on Fire series of Rauchbier. Going beyond the typical styles, he and his brewing team are branching out and experimenting with spoke. And there's been some lovely surprises along the way, and there's even more in the pipeline. Here's our conversation. Do you recall the first time that you had a Rauchbier revelation?
Well, wow, a revelation. That's interesting because I vaguely remember the first time I had a Rauchbier, 30 years ago or something, and being overwhelmed with the bizarreness of it. And then literally fast forward, like I said, 25, 30 years to, so maybe this is a brewmaster thing, but I was actually reading an article, and Weyermann, the Beechwood smoked malt producers out in Bamberg, were discussing how to make a good smoked Märzen. And that's when I just was reading the recipe, and I don't know how to explain this, but I was tasting it in my head, and I was like, I think I need to do this.
What was that first Rauchbier that you had?
Yeah, so it was our smoked Märzen. We named it just like we were very good at naming back then. in that we were so imaginative that we took a smoked Märzen and we called it smoked Märzen. And we've discovered customers actually like, to have a name just to throw out there. So we're getting a little bit better, but not much. Well, so that was the first one we did. Yeah.
And when you think about the first time that you had a Rauchbier and then making one and serving it across the bar, to people, did you see similar reactions of confusion or delight? Or I know there's some people who revolt at it.
Absolutely. And even for myself. So I formulated it and I talked to some brewing buddies of mine to see if anybody that had any experience doing some smoked beers at all, some Rauch beers, and kind of like landed on where I wanted to be on what we have patented, so to speak, not really, but calling it our smokeometer.
Yeah, I'm going to ask you about that as we go forward. Yeah.
So how far I wanted to be there to not just destroy people. But by the same token, so we re-released it and it just was, it's like on first sip, it's like liquid bacon. It just screams bacon to you. And I remember delivering it to, I was so excited about it. It was just wonderful, but telling my taproom staff, saying, this is probably going to be the first beer that we've produced that you are going to not get an in-between reception. People are either going to be like, wow, this is neat, I like it, or they are going to spit it back at you. and that is really how it went in the beginning. Folks just turning their nose up going, whoa, I don't know what this is, but you should take it away from me now. And other people just like raising their eyebrows going, oh, this is interesting. And just to kind of keep going with you, as far as what we saw in our tap room is, so we were watching and everybody thought it was a little too smoky for them. And so the second year I backed off on it a little bit, and everybody was happier. And what they don't know is that then every year after that, because we were only making it like once a year, every year after that, I would increase the smoke to get it back to where I started. and doing the frog in the water thing, where just slowly, so that they didn't notice and they loved it. And we really found what was really exciting was the second year's release. It sold better and faster than the first year.
Really?
Yeah. And there were folks, our regulars and et cetera, that were coming in going, oh, they developed an affinity for it. So we had started to turn some taste buds where they're like, this is fun, and I want to drink this.
So how does an annual release turn into an entire smoked beer initiative? So you call it Flint on Fire.
Yes. Flint on Fire, because we're located on Flint Avenue, and this particular spot, not this building, because there was like in the turn of the last century, whatever they had built here burned down like 3 times in a row. and somewhere in that was my number 2, Gretchen. She was looking at the history, and that's where we came up with Flint on Fire. And Gretchen's important to the story in that I approached her with my idea of making a smoked beer. And so we have a thing here that I created that anybody who stays at Switchback employed for 10 years gets a trip to Germany. And
wow.
On her trip, there's only one requirement. I like to say this, but there is one requirement. So you get an all expenses paid trip to Germany for 2. And the only requirement is that there is a tiny little farm brewery in Launau, Germany, that is my favorite brewery in the world. And you have to go there and drink.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. But the whole rest of the time you can do whatever you want. And she had gone to Bamberg. And so here I just out of the blue mentioned that I kind of really think I'm interested in going into these smoked beers, and her eyes just get wide, and she's like, I loved them. And so it became a little passion play for the 2 of us to move in this. So it was pretty quick that I looked at it, and we immediately made a smoked Hellas.
Yeah.
Just to be traditional. But I had in my head from the very beginning, I said, I think I want to turn this smoke and treat it, rather than just doing historic styles. I want to give it what I would call the American craft brewer treatment, which is, this is really interesting. Now I'm going to completely pervert it and do stuff that no one's ever seen before.
So where did you start?
So we started with our black straddle, which is, it's really, it's a beer typical for me, which is, it's hard to describe. and, but it's got kind of along the lines of a very, very dark brown ale. And it includes dark brown sugar. So my inspiration is Kansas City barbecue. So that's where it came about. I'm talking with my head brewer, Tony, about stuff and saying, what works with smoke? And we thought about barbecue, and having brewed at Boulevard Brewing in Kansas City, I was like, sweet and smoke. I'm going to bring in that dark brown sugar and the molasses in there and counter it with the smoke. I think we got something there, and we produced it, and that actually, as a beer on its release, was for a smoked beer, the one that was most embraced by even the casual drinker who didn't know what they were doing. It just had so much going on and so much entertainment that they so the smoke. So I guess what I'm trying to say here is, so the smoke, rather than playing the primary role, starts to play a complement role. So it's mingling, instead of being, this is smoke. Now it's saying this is just part of this overall complex flavor profile.
I dig that. And you've done oyster stouts. There's been saisons, an IPA, even a Hefeweizen that you put out there. How do you find the smoke becomes the complement and not the focus on, some of these other styles where there are already go-to flavors and aromas that people expect? How does, for Hefeweizen, for example, like, how does smoke add to that recipe or complement that recipe?
So that's a good example, in that my choice was to do a Dunkel Hefeweizen, in part because I thought that the smoke would mingle with that a little better than a straight Hefeweizen, and so I'm looking for that balance of what's going on in there and how they're mingling. So the stouts, you almost can't tell they're smoky.
Sure.
Because the roast and the smoke all just combine, and I always laugh because we put as much smoked malt in those as can be done and still make a stout, because the roasted malts or barleys or whatever aren't smoked. They're just burnt up.
Yeah.
But they are part of the recipe, so they're actually pulling away from a little bit of the smoke. But yeah, or I think a real nice example too is that French saison. That one needs to be a little delicate, right? So I'm tasting, and we do, like, I think I'm pulling this out of the air here. Our saison also has some, like, pink peppercorn and I think orange rind in there, and then of course you've got a very nice saison characteristics to it. So try to imagine that balancing the smoke in there, so that the smoke impression, which is coming from oak smoked wheat as opposed to beechwood smoke, which is a gentler smoke. So it's a gentler smoke, and then the quantity of it. So in my mind anyway, the intensity of that smoke is kind of right alongside the clovey banana, whatever, whatever that crazy saison wild character is. Kind of just playing right in the same threshold level. So you get it, but you're getting the other stuff almost just as strongly.
And what about with IPAs?
Can't be made.
Okay.
but we did it.
You've done it, but
yeah. Wow. And actually I laughed and one of my brewers was on some of the homebrew sites and basically everybody has discovered you can't really make a smoked IPA that tastes good. And we tried it and everybody was correct. And so I'm giving away my secret here, but that's okay. I thought about it. And what we found was just the aroma of hops and the aroma of smoke just weren't pleasant. We couldn't find a combination that anybody liked. And so I thought about it, and what I did was I went with my hops and I went after hop flavor instead of hop aroma.
Okay.
Yeah, so really loaded up the whirlpool and just hammered it so you really taste the hop tea and left the aroma be smoky. And it really came out nicely. In fact, we call it Smoke 40, and it's because it's got 40% smoked malt in it. It's 40 on the smokeometer. And but we actually brewed Smoke 80. And I think Smoke 20. We did different versions to see, how much, and we thought 80 was like pushing it too hard, and we backed off.
Yeah.
And so literally that name, I tell you, we're bad at naming. That name came about because just inside the brewery while we're doing test batches, we're just referring to them as the one with 80 and the one with 40. So it's like Smoke 40, Smoke 80.
Yeah.
And then when we decided on one, they said, what do you call it? And like, I don't know, we've been calling it Smoke 40.
All right. So you've mentioned the smokeometer twice now. For those who are unfamiliar, for those who are curious, for those who want to know what kind of smoke they're getting into, tell us about the scale, how it came about, and how you measure it.
Yeah, and you almost said it there, right in the question. You pretty much said it, which is that's what happens when you're delivering a smoked beer to people. Is you'll have one of the main questions you'll get is, well, how smoky is it? And to me, just being a recipe writer, it was very quick to go, well, this one's 65% smoked malt, so it's about, and this other one's 25% smoked malt, so this one's a 65 and this one's a 25, and realize that people really wanted to know. It's almost like saying an IBU to somebody. It's like, what am I about to get when I drink this IPA? And I just want to prepare myself. And so that's what it became, is the smokeometer that we put on every bottle, on every label, so that if someone looks at it, they can get a feel for just how big a blast smoke they're going to get.
I like it. I don't want you to give away state secrets that you're not quite ready to reveal, but you've done so many styles in this initiative. Are there new ones in the pipelines? Are there ones that you're thinking about that will one day have their turn on the taps?
Well, we just released Katie's Love Poem, which is one of our employees, Katie's. She's Polish, and we made a Polish Grodzicki.
Yeah.
And that just released like last week. So that's the newest of actual releases. As far as in my head, you kind of caught me not thinking about this, because I've got a couple there that I really want to play with, a couple of styles. And really one of the things I'm doing now, and that's where I mentioned Blackstrap. Blackstrap was really inventing just a flavor. Whereas a smoked saison is you're playing with those, and that has become kind of where I've been fiddling with of drinking a style and going, how would smoke play in this? What could you do with this, with this style? Would that work? And I think it's surprising at how many times you're like, if you did this right, the added complexity and the turn here would make a delightful product. And so playing with actual styles, like I say, whether it's a Hefeweizen or a Saison, and fiddling with it a little bit there of what we can do. I'm not doing a very good job here of giving you a hint as to where we want to go, though.
All right. I'm intrigued no matter what.
If you give me an idea right now, I'll make one. How's that?
I'll invite everybody to email into the show with their ideas, or to take to Switchback social media channels to share with you their thoughts. And I'm sure that the rabid fans of This Week in Rauchbier have ideas for you. So
yeah, and seriously, to all of them to think about, like we find, for instance, we had our Gates of Helles, which was our lowest smoked beer because it was a very light Helles, and we call it, as the gateway smoked beer. But what I found is that beer drank like a wonderful lager that just had that little something extra on the complexity side that your taste buds, I felt like almost just a little more entertained than normal. And to kind of think along those lines of what you can do, where it can be in the background, but it just kind of stimulates your taste buds just a little bit more than the normal style.
I wanted to ask you, and I'm mindful of time, but I wanted to ask you, you're still putting these beers in bombers, 22 ounces, which feels very Vermont to me, that packaging format, even in this day and age. Why bombers in an age of cans?
Yeah. So and this gets down to just basic, we own a brewery that has the ability to do bombers. We felt like, of all of our packages, I think when we released it, I don't believe we had our canning line yet. So we do have our canning line now. But we felt like this was a product to be shared, that everybody was that was drinking it was probably looking to, have a little conversation with whoever they were with, like, let's drink this and let's discuss it. And
okay.
that the 22 provided that. And just to give you the breaking news here is we are, you've probably heard a little bit about the canning, fiascos of needing for pre-printed cans, you have to buy 5 truckloads at a time. So
yeah, a million cans.
Yeah. So that kills you for small product runs like this. So we're
but not with the rabid following that Rauchbier has. I mean, you could go through a million cans pretty easily, I imagine.
Oh yeah, 2 weeks. So exactly along those lines. But so we're literally, as you said, with the popularity of stuff, is bring in a labeler so we can label blank cans. And we're really excited with the idea of, this will be a lot of work on our side, but just as I was talking about people really sharing and wanted to discuss, is we're thinking a 4-pack of 16-ounce cans, and every single can is a different type of smoked beer.
Ooh, I like it.
And it's really just trying to, this is
Rauch variety.
Yeah, I shouldn't say this out loud. It's like drug dealing. It's like, we're just convinced that if we can get people to try them, and so we're not even going to ask you to invest in 4 of one flavor. You only have to taste one of it, but we're convinced if we can get it across your lips, you're going to start realizing how much you should be drinking these things.
Yeah, it's probably not the best comparison, but I'll allow it anyway.
Yeah, but and just while I'm thinking of it here, is we just released 2 new, this was last year, I guess, but a new version of a smoked Meriton and a new version of a smoked Helles. And it's because what I did, and so the smoked Helles is twice the smoke level, and the Meriton is basically maxed out the smoke level that I could do, along with the specialty malts that go in there. And it's because our customers are starting to be, attuned to it, and they're ready for it, and they want more.
Incredible. I love it. As you know, every week on the show, I ask everybody the same question, that if you could, when this conversation is over, leave and go to any bar or any brewery anywhere in the world and have a Rauchbier, where would you want to go drink Rauchbier, and who would you want to drink Rauchbier with?
Oh, wow. Well, I would probably go to Mecca and have a Schlenkerla in Bamberg. And I want to drink it with Larry Bell.
Okay. Would Larry accept your invitation?
I think so.
All right.
I think so. I've had, this is neither here nor there, but Boulevard Brewing was John McDonald, and
yep.
And we went to a brewing conference in Brussels this is how old I am, 1995, I think it was.
Okay.
And John was friends with Larry Bell, and we got together, and Larry took us on a tour of Belgium, where he had set up meetings with the monks of Orval and the makers of Saison Dupont and stuff. And what a joy, of a person to hang out with and just love beer. I've never forgotten it.
Well, I think that'd be lovely. And I know Larry's a huge fan of this show, so he'll probably hear it and then reach out to you afterwards. So, Bill Cherry, the founder and brewmaster of Switchback Brewery in Vermont, thanks so much for being on the show this week and sharing your love of Rauchbier and all of the innovation that you're bringing into the space. We certainly appreciate it.
It was good talking to you. I'm loving the Rauch, and I really appreciate your effort to turn this into the juggernaut that it's going to be.
As he does every week, Bart Watson, the chief economist of the Brewers Association, is here to count the smoke numbers and to give us the stats of Rauchbier growth, success, and sales. Bart, welcome back to the show. I'm eager to hear how Rauchbier has done. Please, if you would, give us the cold smoke hard facts.
Thanks for having me, John. It's always great to be on. We're actually at the point in the year where we have annual numbers. So rather than just do our standard weekly numbers, I'm going to jump in with some annual numbers.
Love it.
Based on scan data, again, going through and for some reason, IRI has stopped responding to my notes about creating a route category within their micro styles. But I can still pull a custom number, looking for smoke, Rauch, smoky, and aggregating all the brand level data. And what we see in 21 was, not surprisingly, total scan sales took a step back. We're seeing that channel shift, and people who want, their smoky, delicious beers are looking to get them at bars and restaurants again. So total sales declined. But when we look at share data, things look a little bit better. Even there's still a decline, suggesting, I don't know, maybe what we're learning from this is that the consumer data suggests that people are more likely to want their smoked beers on premise, at bars and restaurants. And so that decline is actually a good thing, and shows that brewers selling these beers are just selling more of them in kegs these days. And so we're seeing a little bit of a bounce back.
We are living in the darkest timeline. So I think that tracks with reality.
it makes sense that, smoked beers would have similar trends to the overall market. There's certain beers that people want to go out and about. What's better than sharing a few smoked beers with friends on a patio somewhere. So I think it's not surprising that we see slightly different trends there from other styles.
Yeah, I've been seeing that for 2022, communal ham water is really going to be an area of growth. I know there's some places that are doing like giant fish bowls with multiple straws for big groups.
Makes sense. I mean, yeah. Tiki, it's been very successful for the tiki community.
Right. COVID be damned.
Yeah.
Bart, is there anything else that you're seeing with those original smoke numbers now?
Well, one thing that I saw underneath the numbers is that, maybe there's some opportunities for diversity of smoked beverages. I saw smoked cider popped up in the brand list. And it makes me wonder, should we, similar to what you're seeing across beer and beverage, should this be this week in Rauch beverage, not Rauch beer? I think we're seeing brewers as consumers, widen their tastes, broaden out. And so, why just smoke beer? Why not smoke cider, smoke wine, smoke RTDs? Clearly people like some of those flavors already, think scotch and soda. So there may be opportunities to do new things with smoked products. And that may be the avenue for growth that smoked beer really needs to get back to the strong numbers we've seen in the last couple of years.
I love how forward thinking you are. Bart, before we let you go, I've been asking everybody on the show, if you could be anywhere right now with anyone, any place in the world, where would you want to be drinking Rauch beer, and who would you want to be drinking it with?
That's a tough one. Obviously, if you're going to be drinking Rauch beer, drinking in Bamberg, with good friends is good, but the weather's getting nice here in Colorado. So, I'll play to my home base and say my patio with my wife, also a smoked beer enthusiast. That's always a great beer to place to share a couple beers.
Keeping Rauch in the family. I love it. Bart, as always, thank you for taking a complex subject and making it easy for all of us to understand. And we'll look forward to talking with you again next week.
Thanks for having me.
All right, Eric and I are back. And as Bart Watson just mentioned, there is room for experimentation in the Rauch space. And so I am so very pleased to be joined by this expert panel that is finding ways to get the smoke we need into the beverages we deserve. Eric is going to be sharing his experience via home brewing and as a consumer, but also with us is Adrian Beck-Oliver. He is the head brewer at Kit NA Brewing Company in Portland, Maine. As a Nova Scotia native, he began his brewing career at Cambridge Brewing Company in 2011, where he worked for 3 years. And then in 2015, he relocated to Maine, first brewing at Rising Tide for 2 years and a few other breweries until May of 2021, when he was one of the first 2 hires at Kit. And his colleague, Simon Burhoe. Simon is the production manager at Kit NA Brewing. Born and raised in New England, Simon started his career in the brewing industry after completing a master's in applied mathematics at UMass Amherst in 2016. He moved to Maine in 2018 to brew at Mass Landing Brewing Company, where he stayed until 2021, when he also joined Kit. And lastly, but not least, Ethan Cox is a craft beer consultant, writer, and educator based in Buffalo, New York. He is a co-founder and co-owner of Community Beer Works, the co-author, along with Michael Rizzo, of Buffalo Beer, A History of Brewing in the Nickel City, and he runs a consulting company under the name Beer Pros, Inc. He also enjoys disc golf, sailing, skiing, and travel. Welcome, all of you, to This Week in Rauch Beer.
Great to be here. Thanks for having us, John.
Yeah, thank you.
So, experimentation in the Rauch space and finding ways of getting smoke into non-traditional beers, I really think is something that's been on the rise for the last couple of years. But innovation is needed. And what I love about what Adrian, you and Simon are doing up in Portland is non-alcoholic beer is certainly gaining a toehold in the U.S. beer market, and it's being done through IPAs and some stouts and even some light beers. But you all are bringing Rauch to the NA space and really, I think, doing God's work. So if you can, tell us a little bit about what you've been brewing and how you've been approaching creating these recipes.
So we're both avid listeners of the podcast, and when we both started back in May, had one of the first conversations we had about beers we wanted to brew was we knew we wanted to brew a Rauchbier. I think we both probably listened to every episode of the show that you do, John.
There's quite a few.
Yeah, it's hard to keep up, but every morning just rolling with it. And we definitely saw that whole, like, everybody's, and the first couple beers that we put out, like one's a blonde ale, one's an IPA. Those are in the market right now, but we needed to get our feet wet. But really, I think our passion is getting a Rauchbier out to the market as well. So we've piloted a couple Rauchbiers on our system. The first was more of a Helles style, taking inspiration from Schlenkerla, which does some wonderful work, and they have an NA beer, Helles, but they don't send it stateside. So no. With seeing the NA market blowing up, and as I'm sure Bart talked about previously, seeing how big the Rauchbier section is, it just seemed like a no-brainer to start dipping our feet into honing in a recipe on that front.
I know we're having fun with this, but there is the precedent with Schlenkerla having their Kinder beer, their low ABV Rauch that's out there. Do you foresee a market for this? I mean, I know it's going to be niche, but
I think the people that, in some ways, when we've talked about making a Rauch beer here, we've thought of it as a way to really pique the interest of the craft beer consumer. And I guess more of the niche craft beer consumer, because I feel like even in the full strength craft segment, the people that seek out Rauch beers are fairly small. So we're trying to entice that segment of the market into the NA segment.
Eric, can you sort of, Europe has been ahead of the curve in the NA space, and Scandinavia's been ahead of the curve in the NA space. Basically the rest of the world, I think, aside from the US, where we've had to suffer through a lot of mediocre non-alcoholic beer, and mediocre I'm being generous with. Obviously that's changing with Kit and other breweries. What is the NA scene like in Sweden for you right now, and do you foresee a demand for NA Rauch beer?
Yes, for sure. I definitely see breweries expanding their non-alcoholic selection, and even smaller craft breweries making non-alcoholic beers here in Sweden. So at the local grocery stores, you can usually find 10 to 20 different non-alcoholic beers, some from local breweries and some from macros and imported ones as well. But I think getting to the point where you will find non-alcoholic Rauch beer on the shelf, I think that's still going to take some time, even here in Sweden, where we're on the forefront. But I'm hopeful. I'm very hopeful.
And in the NA, back at Kit, you all just brewed a second Rauch.
Yep. Yeah, I guess we're going off of a darker base recipe. The interesting thing with NA beers is because it's considered a cereal beverage in the under the TTB, it can only really be called a dark. So we can't call it a stout or a dark mild or anything like that. So we're playing, as we think about releasing a dark beer as a seasonal, we're kind of playing around with all the various components that we could pull from. So trying to see what a dark base is going to do with smoke malt, and then as well as being NA and with our production process to see what we get from that. But, we want to make sure that we've covered all of our bases. And I think it would be, if we could sneak maybe 2 to 5% smoke malt in our seasonal dark beer, then we would have accomplished something.
That's a win. That's a win. Ethan, questions for your fellow NA panelists? I know you're a man of the people who has a insatiable thirst for knowledge.
Insatiable. I cannot quench it. I resonate with the fact that any hill that you can die on when it comes to smoke, you should. So, so I think any smoke beers are the obvious one out there remaining to be conquered. And I applaud the effort. I actually think that they're in all seriousness, if the full potential of NA beer is to be fulfilled, I mean, I'm not joking, then there's no alcohol beer flavor or profile or style that shouldn't get the treatment. And I understand that the market's not going to be huge in all seriousness, but that doesn't mean that a lot of people, in fact, aren't going to appreciate it. And I think this week in Rauchbier proves that. I mean, look at the smashing success of the podcast.
It's like you're sitting in our meeting rooms with us, Ethan.
Yeah. And I'm working a little bit in the seltzer space now, both NA and not. And again, the sky's the limit in terms of flavor profiles, whether you're trying to make an NA or non-NA seltzer. So it's only a matter of time before White Claw throws out their Rauch seltzer. I'm pretty sure it's coming.
White Claw ham. It's I'm super excited. So, Ethan, if in the seltzer space, which continues to perform incredibly well, if you were to smoke a seltzer, how do you think you would approach that? Where does your brewer's mind take you?
Yeah, well, not. I think when you don't have smoked malt as an ingredient to really use, you have to find creative ways to infuse your water with smoke. And what comes to mind is almost a bong-like device where you load it up with oak or beech wood or some obtuse South American wood variety, and then you draw the smoke through the water. And infuse it, and then and take that and make seltzer with it. I think that's going to work. That's my plan.
So it's essentially bong water.
Yeah, I mean,
but good. Yeah,
but good bong water. Yeah. Bong water you want to drink. It's carbonated, so
it's carbonated. It's alcoholic.
It's ingredients.
It's all the things bong water's not. I think that's the way. That and smoking your sugar, but I don't know. That's dangerous.
Yeah, I mean, you could also smoke fruits.
Realistically,
fruit additions, I imagine.
Yeah, no. Realistically, you could. And in fact, looking at what's happening, that's innovative in terms of smoked stuff. I have seen a number of beers now that have come up on the Facebook page where they're using smoked fruit as one of the components. And I find that actually to be very intriguing. And then also realistically, I think there's some tea profiles that are pretty smoky, or lapsang soujongs there, gunpowder, that could be used in a seltzer in some way to add a smoky dimension. It would be, a smoky tea dimension, but that could definitely be done.
I think that's called White Claw Bang, the one that has gunpowder in it. Eric, you've been home brewing Rauch beers for a long time now. Where are you drawing inspiration from? What are you finding? Where's your creativity in Rauch leading you these days?
I like starting out from sort of the traditional German history of beer, and the most interesting smoked beer that I've ever brewed was actually a Lichtenheiner, which is a smoked sour beer, and it's it's actually ham water is probably the closest description that you're gonna be able to give for it. But I thought it was pretty good actually. I did enter it into the Swedish National Homebrewing Competition, and it didn't place in the People's Choice, but there were some encouraging words from some of the patrons, and one even said it was the best beer he had the whole day. But this
That's
was
all that matters.
Very late in the afternoon when he probably had a lot of beer. And I did also enter it into the judges competition, but apparently I suffered poor scores from not describing the style. So I thought that the judges would know Lichtenheiner and be familiar with the style, but apparently not. So my short description was not enough to give it a good score. But now I'll know for next time when I enter the beer again.
Well, you all know the drill on This Week in Rauchbier. This is the part of the show where I ask you a very specific question, and everybody's going to have a chance to answer. But if you could be at any pub, anywhere with anybody, what Rauchbier would you be drinking? Where would you be drinking it? And who would you be drinking it with? And Ethan, let's start with you.
Wow. Okay. I've never been. So for me, the Holy Grail is absolutely to finally one day settle down at the bar at Schlenkerla in Bamberg and enjoy. Actually, my favorite of theirs is the Helles. I actually really love that beer of all of their offerings. And I've had them, but I've never had them in situ. And so I think that would be just amazing. As for who, I mean, can it be anybody? Like people that aren't realistically going to be sitting down at a pub in Bamberg with me anytime soon?
Yeah, that's how this game works.
Great. Then because he's been on my mind recently, I think maybe like a lot of people, I'd like to have Michael Jackson there.
That'd be great.
Yeah, I think that would be pretty amazing. And I'd like to have him just, give forth on the nature of Rauch.
Simon, same question to you. Anywhere in the world, any pub, what Rauch beer do you want to be drinking and who do you want to be drinking it with?
Oh, man. I think I would have to echo Ethan's location of Schlenkerla in Bamberg. I think that would just be, it's on my bucket list. So
of course.
Yeah. Never been, so got to do that. And who to be there with? I think my friend Taylor would be an excellent person to enjoy a beverage at Schlenkerla with. He is an avid fan of smoke beer. I think at least once a week we're talking about how much we love Schlenkerla and how much people don't appreciate it. And so I think to be there together in the motherland would be perfect.
Adrian.
Yeah, so I'm I guess recently been abstaining from alcohol, so I'm gonna definitely go the Schlenker route, but I'm very curious about their NA offering, given that we don't get it stateside, and I'd imagine it's on par with everything else they do, which are absolutely fantastic. I was having this conversation with our owner earlier, and he was drinking our first Rauchbier, and it really reminded him of when I was 12, going into the pool halls where there was smoke everywhere. So that got me thinking of going back to like my university, the pub on campus at Acadia in Nova Scotia, where I went to school. Going back before they had the smoking ban, and then just really being able to have that smoke beer, have it at that location. And I think the person I would share it with or share that experience with would be my dad, who I unfortunately never got the chance to sit down with a beer with. And he also went to college at that same school. So great opportunity for us to bond over that location in that smoky bar. And if there's a lot of smoke in the air, he probably wouldn't. He was a big like Canadian and Keith's guy. He got excited when they come down to the States and he could bring back full strength Budweiser. So I'm hoping he wouldn't. I'm hoping he wouldn't notice the extra smoke in the glass with everything in the room. So that's my 3.
I love it. Eric, same question to you. What Rauchbier, where at, who with, and why?
Yeah, now that everyone has sort of gone down the Bamberg route, I feel like I have to mix it up a bit, even though I would love to go to Bamberg. I would want to sit down at Carton Brewing with Augie Carton and share a Schlenkerla Märzen and talk about the wonders of smoked beer. That would be lovely.
We can probably arrange that. That can probably be arranged. Jackson's going to be a little harder, to get, but Augie's typically available. I love that. Simon, Adrian, Ethan, thank you for being on this roundtable with us this week in Rauchbier. It's wonderful hearing your insights and what the future of smoke in our beverages is to come. Thank you.
Oh, it's been such a pleasure to be on. As they say, first time, long time, right? So
thanks, John.
Yeah, very much. Thank you. It was a pleasure. It's always fun to engage in Rauch discussion.
And with that, my friends in Rauch, this is the end of our show for this week. Eric, thank you for being such a wonderful and great co-host. I really appreciate it, and I hope you've enjoyed this. I want to leave you with one last question, though. What would you like to see Rauchbier accomplish in 2022?
Thank you, John. I would like to see Rauchbier available year-round at Systembolaget in Sweden. That would be my personal dream. And I would like to see more Swedish breweries dare to enter the Rauch space. For instance, Omnipojo, who are now brewing here in Stockholm, and they're brewing a lot of traditional German lagers. So why don't they brew a couple of Rauch beers to go with it?
Why don't they put one through the Schlessie machine?
Exactly.
That too. That too.
But with their traditional, that'd be a wonderful thing to see. I love that, seeing more Rauch. I cut you off with a joke. I imagine you had an end to that thought.
No, I think that wraps it up pretty well, actually. So
Perfect.
Let's leave it at that.
All right. A reminder to join the This Week in Rauchbier group on Facebook and to follow us on Twitter and Instagram at TW Rauchbier. Merch, including glassware and Camp Rauchbier mugs and shirts, are available on our website, which is beeredge.com. Thank you, as always, for tuning in, for your telegrams of support, and for your willingness to indulge on this first day of April 2022. Alongside Eric Leto, I'm John Hall. And for now, stay safe, look out for one another, and drink that smoke if you got it. Good night.